The Manhattan District Attorney has just responded to President-elect Donald Trump's request for a delay in his sentencing over his hush money conviction. Trump is set to be sentenced on 34 counts of falsifying business records this Friday, just weeks before his inauguration. Let's bring in CNN Chief Legal Affairs Correspondent Paula Reed. Paula, what is the DA saying here?
Well, the brief is pretty legalistic, so let me translate it. Essentially, they're saying don't grant this delay, but they give some reasons. They're saying, look, you're not going to suffer any prejudice from this sentencing because the judge has already said you're not going to see any penalties. They're also saying, look, you can do this virtually instead of in person, and also a reminder that you need the sentencing. You need the entry of judgment so that you can pursue the appeals that you have repeatedly said you want to pursue. Of course, since Trump was convicted, he's been trying to get this conviction tossed. Since he was reelected, they've been using his status as president-elect to try to get this case tossed. They've also tried to get this case tossed based on the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, arguing that some of the evidence that came in at trial could be official acts and therefore the conviction should be tossed. None of this has worked with the judge. But on Friday, Judge Juan Merchan did concede one thing to the Trump team. He said, look, I get there are physical and mental demands on you as the president-elect, so I'm going to let you attend this sentencing virtually. And he also made it clear he's not going to apply any penalties to the president-elect. Look, it's not clear if this is going to be successful, Boris. It's unlikely this is going to be successful. But if there is any delay, that makes it highly unlikely that Trump would be sentenced before Inauguration Day, which means that this would just kind of be hovering over him for about 4 years. And Judge Merchan.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that happens, what the scenarios are for after Trump leaves office.
I don't think Merchan is going to go for this.
Yeah. Paula Reed, thank you so much. Let's discuss further now with defense attorney Misty Marris. Misty, thanks so much for being with us. The Manhattan DA is urging Judge Merchan to deny this request by Trump to delay the sentencing. I wonder what you make of that and what potentially is next.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised to hear that Alvin Bragg was going to oppose the Trump team's application to delay this sentencing. And look, what they laid out in their response is the legal standard for what's called a stay. And that's what President-elect Trump is looking for. He's looking for this to be postponed. And a stay requires a showing of irreparable harm. So if this were to go forward, there would be irreparable harm and there's a likelihood of success on the merits. And the merits in this case would be that underlying appeal that they intend to make with respect to the immunity ruling. We know Judge Merchan denied their request to overturn the conviction based on the Supreme Court's decision about immunity, but the Trump team wants to bring that up to the higher level courts in New York State to make that determination. So you see Alvin Bragg and his team attacking that legal standard, as well as the thing that's really the most compelling is that in order for Trump to actually pursue this other bucket of appeals, it's important to separate the two, one relating to immunity, one an appeal of the verdict itself based on the evidentiary decisions and all the other appellate arguments that would exist, federal supremacy and all those appeals cannot be done until the sentencing goes forward. So that's the push-pull we're seeing here between the two sides.
I also wonder on Trump's side, what's the legal strategy behind wanting to avoid this sentencing, even though he he knows the outcome. He knows he's not going to face any jail time.
Right, and he would be able to move forward with those appeals where he'll be able to actually attack the evidentiary issues, which of course has been spoken about in great detail by his team in legal filings about the trial itself. So, Boris, I think it's less of a legal question and more of the impact on what that means from the public perception perspective, because the difference right now is that he's technically not a convicted felon until that sentencing hearing moves forward. And if he is actually going through that sentencing proceeding, that would be the difference, that label of convicted felon. So it seems that his legal team is trying to punt this out so that still is up in the air and not a label that would be on him as he's inaugurated.
Misty, while we have you, there was a bit of news that just came down, and that is that a federal judge has found Rudy Giuliani in contempt for failing to turn over information to two former Georgia election workers that he defamed after the 2020 election. Remember, they're pursuing Giuliani for $150 million in damages. They've had a hard time trying to collect that. Giuliani has had all sorts of issues after he was found liable in court over this. What would be next in the case, Misty?
So right now, yeah, this is an issue about his Palm Beach residence primarily, and whether or not that can be used to satisfy the judgment. And his argument is this is his private residence, and there's laws in Florida that can help shield your private residence from being something that would be subject to judgment collection. So that's where this all stems from. This hearing was about all of these documents and information and evidence that he was supposed to turn over to establish whether or not it would qualify under those restrictions as far as collection. And he admitted, Boris, in his contempt hearing that he did fail to turn over evidence and information that he was supposed to and he was ordered to do. He gave excuses, but he said that he didn't do it. And that was really, the nail in the coffin, because at that point, it was almost inevitable we're going to see this contempt finding. This means that additional charges can be added. There's going to be additional financial penalties relating to this. And also now all of that stuff that he needs to turn over has to be done ASAP. So there's a lot of legal repercussions coming down the pike with respect to this contempt hearing that's outside of all of his other legal troubles.
Misty Marris, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.